Joining us right now, Dr. Leon Aron. He's the resident scholar and director of Russian Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. By the way, a new book out just in time, Roads to the Temple, Truth, Memory, Ideas, and Ideals of the Making of the Russian Revolution, 1987-91. Now, that Russian Revolution, Dr. Aron, throughout the old Soviet Union, are we seeing a regrouping of that Soviet Union under Vladimir Putin and a beginning of a new Cold War?
Putin, the speech that Putin made on March 18th announcing the annexation of the Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, certainly sounded like it, and lots of Russian commentaries actually compared it to Churchill-Fulton's speech announcing the Iron Curtain.
And is it enough for our president and our Secretary of State to just constantly announce at press conferences and on the world stage, Vladimir Putin is on the wrong side of history, he's in the wrong century, this is not the 80s, there is no Cold War anymore? It sounds like they're just trying to wish it to be true. Is that enough?
Yes, it's a bit of a voodoo swearing, and you pronounce words and you're hoping that the world will conform to what you're saying. No, it's not enough. We have to increase the cost for Putin to pursue his policies, and nobody, let's just get rid of the straw man right away. Nobody's talking about militarily. In fact, militarily is not even the most effective way to influence Putin. It's the economy.
Right.
The Russian economy is already teetering. They're talking about a recession. The ruble is historically low against the euro. All kinds of things are happening. The capital is flying. So even a moderately but serious biting sanctions could do it.
Well, hi, Leon. This is Steve Moore. So we have sanctions, right? I mean, are those sanctions? It sounds like you're saying that those sanctions are working and that we should strengthen them. I mean, is that a case for the idea that the Obama strategy is paying off?
Well, I never said that they're working. No, as you could see in the so-called agreements in Geneva on Friday, no mention of the 50,000 Russian troops, no mention of the special troops, Spetsnaz, in Ukraine that are wreaking havoc there and provoking a civil war, and of course no mention that Russia will not interfere with the presidential elections in Ukraine on May 25th. None of that is there, and the reason for that is because Putin has no reason to negotiate seriously.
So, can you explain to people why it is that Putin wants this land in Crimea? I mean, is this all related to pipelines and energy? Is that what this is really all about, or is this about
Steve, I know
expanding?
You're an economist,
right?
And economics is just a tiny part of it, but no. Putin, basically, the idea is this: there are three goals: to cajole or threaten the West into meaningless sanctions, or only moderate sanctions, which is what he's achieved so far, to rally around the flag and solidify his base at home. That's a very important goal because I think he wants to stay president for life.
Right.
And to punish, humiliate, dismember, and derail the Ukraine. That's the key goal.
Why? I mean, why the third thing?
So why? Because Putin's idea of a new Russia is a Russia that dictates foreign policy and probably domestic policy of all post-Soviet nations.
Well, that does sound like
so
the
it
Cold
is.
War,
He's
right?
getting the old team back together.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, but without a territorial unity. In other words, he does not want to have a Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine or Soviet Socialist Republic of Georgia or Belarus or anything. In other words, he wants to stay to make Russia an arbiter, a hegemonic power there that would say, okay, this foreign policy is a go, you can do this, but you cannot do this. And Ukraine defied that. And that's extremely painful for him domestically. And that's why he had to recover, he had to retaliate.
Our guest is Dr. Leon Aron. He's the resident scholar and director of Russian Studies at American Enterprise Institute. And Dr. Aron, if you were getting a phone call today from Vice President Biden, he says, hey, Leon, heading over there to Ukraine, if you were me, what would you do? What should I do? What's the advice you give to the Vice President on the way to this yet another trip?
And don't
to try to calm
don't
things
say
down?
summer of recovery.
Yeah.
No. He has to go there and announce some serious sanctions on the Russian oil
Like
and
what?
gas imports to Europe, on Russian financial system.
But-
in other words, start doing what we've done with Iran. It's not going to be immediate.
Well, won't that?
But isn't Germany and France and the Western nations in Europe standing in the way of that because they need
want
that? They don't want the sanctions because they need it.
First of all, they don't want part of it because they don't trust the United States to really stay with it and lead, and you cannot blame them.
Right.
But if we're serious, if we say we'll sanction any bank in the world that deals with say Russian Gazprom, natural gas giant, or Rosneft, Russia's largest oil company, believe me, they will follow.
So it sounds like one thing we ought to be doing then is speeding up LNG terminals and other things so we could export our oil and gas to Western Europe.
That takes time, Steve. Yeah, absolutely, as part of it.
I know that's going to take time, but shouldn't we start right now? I mean, isn't this the time to get serious? I mean, this crisis isn't going to go away in a few weeks. I mean, if you're right that they have these imperialistic kind of ambitions,
we have to ramp up.
Why don't we ramp up now?
Well, we have to deploy every means that we have, and I think what you guys are trying to say is exactly correct. Treat this as the most important geopolitical challenge to the free world since the end of the Cold War.
Right.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Aron, because I know that you were in Russia back in the day, and you still have a lot of contacts back there. What is it like in Russia now in terms of the propaganda, in terms of the media? I mean, is Putin making it feel like the old Soviet Union, and are people getting propagandized the same way they had been?
My goodness, I've written somewhere that it's actually worse. I was there when the Soviet Union was growing up there, when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia. I've never heard a propaganda of such frenzied vulgarity as what you're having now in Russia today. You know, the man that Putin appointed, the chief propagandist, the head of the merged propaganda agencies, including the so-called Russia Today TV, recently bragged on the most popular television show that Russia is the only country that could reduce the United States to the radioactive ash. This is a direct quote.
I remember that.
And this I never heard growing up in the Soviet Union. I also never heard something like what Putin said in his speech to the Russian elite on March 18th. He used the term for essentially a rape, a forced social intercourse, a slang, to describe the U.S. policy vis-a-vis world community. I've never heard anything like this.
So just really quickly with the propaganda, they're actually speaking of the United States of America, led by Barack Obama circa 2014, with more disdain and more hostility than they did during the height of the Cold War.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Wow. That's sobering to hear. Dr. Leon Aron, thanks so much for joining us today. Again, he is the Director of Russian Studies at American Enterprise Institute. His book, Roads to the Temple, Truth, Memory, Ideas, and Ideals in the Making of the Russian Revolution, 87 to 91.